Nearly fell over. Love it.
Started. We've got a couple folks coming in. I'm going to get started because we're at 6:07. I know people have various things they want to do in Charleston. So welcome. I'm Kate Keeney. I'm the program director of the Arts Management program here. And we are, come on in. We are kind of team tagging here. This is our third Arts Management Exchange talk this evening, and also the opening talk of the Southeastern Arts Leadership Conference. So thank you all for being here from all over the place. Yeah. Beyond just the Southeast, so welcome to Charleston. And apologies that it's also the Seaweed Festival this weekend. So I know that's made it a little bit challenging. I will say for the folks who are here for the SAIL conference, when we're done chatting with our guests this evening, we're gonna just review the schedule tomorrow, and if there's any questions about parking and that sort of thing, we'll address that. So our guest for this evening is Dr. Mena Mark Hanna. He's the General Director and CEO of Spoleto Festival USA, so we're very excited to welcome him. We're going to do a little Q&A, and I've asked him to talk a little bit about coming into an organization, like what is that like in the first 1 or 2 years, and also how Spoleto Festival is balancing as an organization both international and local priorities. So Dr. Hanna was previously served as founding dean of the Barenboim Said Academy in Berlin, and also as assistant artistic director of the Houston Grand Opera. He graduated summa cum laude from the Bover College of Music and Dance at Temple University, and also has studied at Oxford University, where he earned his master's and doctorate degrees in musicology and composition. Unfortunately, our keyboards are locked, or else we would have had him play for us. He's also studied at Harvard's Kennedy School in Nonprofit Leadership. And he also serves on the board of directors for the Mahler Foundation and on the advisory board of the Time and Children's Arts Initiative in New York. So please welcome Dr. Mena Mark Hanna. We'll see if I can do all that I want to do here. I got to turn this on too.
Hi.
Great. Good, turn it on first. Okay, I got a lot of things going on.
Great. We're good.
So we're going to get started. First, we'd like to talk a little bit about your background. So we in Charleston know Mena as affiliated with Spoleto, but like I said, there was a whole life before Spoleto. So what was your path to arts leadership like, and what factors called you from being a pianist and a composer to an executive leader?
It's circuitous. It's never straightforward. I started very young in music. I was a diva boy soprano in the Philadelphia Boys Choir. And when my voice changed, my world crumbled around me, and I diverted my efforts into composition. My parents, who are Egyptian immigrants, wanted me sort of to go down the well-trodden path of clerical professionalism. And when medical school did not pan out, because I would faint at the sight of blood, they thought law school, that's the next best option. So I, was like gonna study pre-law and political science in Washington, D.C., and at the last minute, I thought, nope, not doing that. I'm going to Temple instead to study music composition. And then decided to do a backup degree in ancient languages and philosophy, just to really stick it to them. And so when I was a senior at Temple, that sort of decision kind of came up again, and I thought, okay, maybe I'll go to law school. I did the LSAT, and then I got a Marshall Scholarship instead to go to Oxford, to study and do my master's and PhD there, at which point my parents gave up. Well, actually, my mom still hasn't given up. She's still sending me, after, tons of years of education, way too much time studying and degrees, so on and so forth. She's still like, yeah, maybe go do something else. Go get an MBA, go get a JD, that's just the immigrant parent kind of mentality. It's a very intense household. And so after I did my PhD, I started a postdoc fellowship at NYU in New York. kind of quickly realized I didn't want to go fully into academia, and spent 6 months working at an artist management firm called Opus 3 Artists, with a man named David Foster, who has since become a very a great mentor of mine. And then went to Houston, and there I kind of did both at the same time. I was at Houston Grand Opera as the assistant artistic director, and also on musicology faculty at Rice University. And about my second year there, an old friend of mine that I got to know from Oxford kind of came out of the woodwork and said, Daniel Barenboim wants to start a music conservatory in Berlin. What do you think about that? And I said, well, I've met Daniel once or twice, and he doesn't seem like a very easy person to work for. And that was 100% correct.
This is being watched online. So.
Yeah, oh, is it really? Well, he's a wonderful person to work for. I mean, look, it's fine. He would not dispute that notion whatsoever. And I thought to myself, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to go to Berlin, help build a concert hall that was designed by Frank Gehry, and create a new conservatory from scratch that was partially funded by the German government, partially privately funded, and then start to program in that concert hall and create a curriculum around it for undergraduate and graduate students. It was just something you couldn't let up. And then the other aspect of this is that it's Berlin, it's Barenboim, it's Daniel Barenboim, and the other half is Edward Said. And both of them, are known for founding the West Eastern Divan Orchestra, a group of musicians that I think is the only non-diplomatic entity to ever get ambassador status from the United Nations. And it's a group of Arab and Israeli musicians that perform all over the world. They've become a remarkably professional, incredible orchestra that Daniel has managed to turn into a cutting-edge organization. And this would be the kind of brick and mortar manifestation of that orchestra. So something that I was very close to, very much attached to, and was still kind of in the realm of academia and arts leadership and civic leadership, having to do all the stuff, of course, in German, which is as complicated as one would imagine, and also kind of getting an in-the-room look at the unstoppable force of Daniel Barenboim slam into the immovable object of Frank Gehry when we were trying to create this concert hall. And my goodness, I would not take those 7 years away from anything. Like, it was the most remarkable 7 years. But when I was in Europe, the festival really kind of sort of captured my mind's imagination as one of the preeminent vehicles for artistic celebration and artistic excellence, because it could be interdisciplinary, it's time delimited, you can do so much within this specific period of time. I became obsessed with that kind of vehicle and started to curate these mini festivals in the Barenboim Said Academy in the Pierre Belazal, which is the Gehry designed concert hall. And they were interdisciplinary festivals that had music performance, that had lecture, that had film, that had visual arts. So that's sort of how I started to get more into the festival world, obviously with a background in opera production through my years at Houston Grand Opera. So obviously Spoleto is a pretty natural place for me to be, since it is the country's preeminent interdisciplinary performing arts festival that is a producing entity, and that also has opera at its forefront. I mean, it's effectively a unicorn. There aren't really many entities like that in the United States. There aren't many in the world. And so, when this job came up, of course, I've known Nigel for some time. We met first in 2012, 2011. I thought to myself, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity again. Let's go for it. And that's how I ended up here.
Yeah, so, I mean, it would be really interesting to expand a little bit on that match, right? So you're kind of talking about you were interested in going to a festival work. How did they recruit you? How did that match, really, if you don't mind? It was all of us working in arts leadership and thinking about, replacing arts leaders. So how did that, can you go into more detail about what really sealed the deal for you to come to Charleston?
So I first heard about the position a friend of mine in the sector. And, I had been talking to him about what the next step should be. This is in the middle of COVID. My wife and I just had our first child in Berlin. My wife is Irish. I'm like an Egyptian American born in London. We're both speaking German. We're looking at each other and we're like, why are we living here? Especially when, day-to-day life sort of shuts down and you're not working every day and you're not sort of on the hustle. You sort of feel like, maybe you want to be in a place that is more familiar to raise your family. And so we started thinking about positions in the United States. And I mean, it's just sort of the luck of being in the right place at the right time.
Great. Tell us a little bit about your first Spoleto year, which was right after the pandemic, coming out of I guess we're still in the pandemic. And I love this quote. Maybe you can talk a little bit about Omar, which was a big operatic production there, and how this was really kind of full circle for you that year, and maybe what it was like getting that festival back on track. It was probably a lot of ups and downs, I would imagine.
Yeah. A friend of mine who's run a pretty notable festival in Europe, when I told him I was getting this job, told me that a festival is a series of catastrophes. And you just don't let anybody know that it's going on. It's backstage. It's not on stage. Sometimes they're on stage too. And I think that sentiment could not be truer than coming out of COVID. We had a pared down festival in 2021 that was socially distanced. That was probably about 30% capacity. 2020 was a complete dark season. Nothing happened. So 2022 was the big party. That was us, coming out of the pandemic, and I use air quotes there, because I think when you think about it, pandemic is a state of essence and being, not just a state of mind. And that was something that had a tremendous impact on the organization. It has had a deleterious impact on the sector as a whole. We still haven't really bounced back. You're looking at general ticket sales through the performing arts sector, hover at 50% or less. It's tough. So to come out and say, okay, we're doing it. We're doing 130 performances in 17 days. We're going to do 3 operas. We're going to have dance. We're going to have theater. We're going to have jazz, popular music, etc. Is quite a statement and an ambitious statement, and it's one that I don't think would have been possible without the support of an incredibly ambitious and well-resourced board, a city that looks at Spoleto as a point of civic pride, as something that we could rally around and celebrate sort of the dark emergence from a dark past, and also reflect that in what we are doing programmatically. I mean, the funny thing about Omar specifically is that Omar was actually commissioned to be premiered in 2020, before the pandemic, before the murder of George Floyd. Omar in 2020 is a different piece than Omar in 2022, completely. It has a different context, a different sense of meaning. And that's the inextricable entanglement between society and art that a festival like this, that any performing art really has at its core. That just because our political and social and cultural reality has changed, this piece and how we receive it and how we premiere it and how we produce it and who we attach as the director and who we attach as the choreographer and who we attach as the designer of the piece all must change as well, because it cannot be the same thing that we were going to do in 2020. And that was true for the composers, for Michael Abels and Rhiannon Giddens, and that's also true, I think, for the director Kaneza Shaw and the designer Christopher Myers. And I mean, for me, it was incredibly meaningful. I'm a native Arabic speaker. To have an opera based on the only extant autobiography in Arabic of an enslaved West African in North America, and to have it happen less than a mile away from where this man was sold into bondage at Gadsden's Wharf, it's a moment of of confronting, some of the greatest ills of this city, which has been to whitewash that past and ignore it. So it's something that I'm tremendously proud of. We managed to create a co-production and co-commissioning consortium, which included the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, San Francisco Opera, Chicago Lyric Opera, LA Opera, Detroit Opera, Boston Lyric Opera. And after it goes through the United States, it'll also go to Europe. So it's something that, we're really excited about that we were able to do. I mean, the other thing that we did was Barenboim backwards, where we started with the fourth act and ended with the first act. That was a production by Yuval Sharon. That was also a new production. And I hope I'm not giving anything away, but Mimi dies at the end of Barenboim. And to actually have the opera in reverse, which starts with the death and is kind of like a kind of rewind into light and life and young love, to me was an eloquent statement coming out of the pandemic.
Great, thank you. Let's talk a little bit about what we are expecting with Spoleto this year. No, I don't want that. No, I don't want that. Whoa, whoa. Uh-oh. Pull away, pull away. Oops. Oh, no. Okay. Okay, I don't know what to do now. Okay. Oh, Jesse's here. Okay. We're going to play a little teaser video. Thanks, Kim Wilson. Come on down. Okay. We have a short teaser video, which this will be a full, we're back now. Is it a full like it used to be pre-pandemic? Or?
Yeah,
okay.
So 2022 was as well.
Okay, great. All right, let's see what we got. And many people are not familiar. Again, everybody in Charleston lives and eats and breathes Spoleto, so here we go. Nope, Jesse, help me.
Charleston is a port city, and a port city is a place where you have a transfer of ideas. You have all of these different cultures. And that's what Spoleto Festival is. It is the result of this port city, of these different cultures colliding. You see it in our food. You see it in the way people talk to each other. You see it in everyday expressions in this city. Spoleto has this way of being both international and local, timely and universal. It's a one-of-a-kind place. There aren't many festivals I can think of that bring together theater, dance, jazz, popular music, orchestral music, choral music, opera, all in one place at one time. Come join us.
So I know you said you didn't like that video, but I like it. It shows off Charleston too. So I want to expand a little bit on your defining Spoleto as both international and local, because I want to get a sense if you think Spoleto's always had that definition. Is it something that you see becoming more important moving forward? And how do you, in the day-to-day and programming, make it both international and local?
So, Spoleto is a nonprofit entity. Nonprofits sit sometimes uncomfortably between the public sector, the government, and the private sector. And the reason why they exist, the reason why we have them with such strength and virility in this nation, and you can read about this in de Tocqueville, is because some of the public sector falls short, and some of the private sector is about personal wealth and ambition. And there needs to be something in the middle to bridge that public to private sector. So as a nonprofit entity, something like Spoleto has to be deeply invested in creating public value, in engendering and creating and cultivating a creative and cultural ecosystem. When you look at what Spoleto is and has been in the past, it's been this absolutely spectacular almost kind of energetic. It's like lightning in a bottle, time-delimited entity that happens during those precious 17 days in May to June that really put Charleston, not just figuratively, but almost literally on the map as an international destination. And that has sparked a chain of events that has brought us to Charleston today, a Charleston that has to contend with changing demographics, that has to contend with gentrification, that has to contend with some overdevelopment. And Spoleto has to understand that the creation of public value is a way for us to transcend the most difficult political, social, and cultural disparities that exist, between people in our society today. And that was true in Germany, and that's true in the United States. I think it's truly through the performing arts that you can transcend those difficulties. I think that something about sitting in a theater and having a newness and an appreciation that you did not have before you took your seat is transformative. And everybody in that theater has this kind of communal, almost religious event that happens to them, some kind of change in perspective and psyche. And to me, that needs to be captured, and that needs to be spread, and that needs to be grown, that public value. So the festival is not a categorical imposition that happens for 17 days on the city. It would be a fount and a creator of public value year-round, and that would be through education, through engagement, through that incredible work that art can do that can transcend all of those disparities that I just mentioned. So that local national or local international mixture, yes, it is about the port city, that mixture of how ideas from abroad intermingle to create unique ideas and perspectives and cultures in this very, very special place. But it's also about taking that energy and trying to find a way to actually engender it throughout the year. And for me, the future Spoleto is not just about a 17-day delimited event. It's about public value year-round for this community, for the region, for the Southeast, for the state of South Carolina. And that public value is not necessarily performance. I'm not talking about year-round performances. I'm not going to touch that. I mean, the reason why Spoleto has national, international visibility is because it's a 17-day festival. I'm not touching that at all. Let's keep that. That's fabulous. I'm talking about actual educational and engagement efforts that happen year-round. And that's what I want to see happen. That's the Spoleto of the future.
Can you talk, you have 2 or 3 pieces that you want to talk about for this season that illustrate this value connection between international and local? Would you mind expanding on the first one's the Book of Love?
A Book of Life.
Book of Life.
Yeah. So The Book of Life is a play by Kike Katese. This is the U.S. or the North American premiere of the play. Kike is a Rwandan playwright, activist, poet, director, who charged perpetrators of the Rwandan genocide to write letters to their victims. Now, just the past couple of years. They're in jail. She went to jail in 2019, 2018, 2017. She found these people who had actually committed murder and said, okay, now you have to write a letter to your victim. It's an actual valuable artifact of reconciliation that she is creating. And she turned that into a one-woman play where she is surrounded by a troupe of drummers, women drummers, called Ngoma, which are drummers that, drumming in Central Africa is incredibly sacred, and it's basically only a male ritual. So she's breaking through the glass ceiling, or she's puncturing through the animal hide of the drum to create this idea that you can have a perspective that is not the selfish male perspective that brought on the Rwandan genocide, and that there can be a place for female empowerment through this play. And even though the play like sounds incredibly heavy and incredibly difficult, the material of it, there's a lightness to it. There's a wit to it, a brevity to it, a kind of grace to it. And she brings this heavy material and somehow turns it into this beautiful, rejuvenative, transformative event that happens on stage. Without it feeling like heavy or pedantic or kind of hitting you over the head with the heaviness of the material that she's sourced it. And it becomes very personal. You know, she also talks about her grandmother who she lost in the genocide. She was, this is also a story of migration, of forced migration. She was displaced as a Rwandan growing up in Congo. So there's so many different layers that come in to make up this individual and how she's actually expressing it on stage. It's a very exciting play.
And then maybe one more, you mentioned A Poet's Love or the Scottish ballet, The Crucible. Is there one more you want to talk about?
So I'll talk about both of them really quickly. A Poet's Love, I'll try to be quick. A Poet's Love is a world premiere featuring Jemez McCorkle, who was Omar last year in Omar. Jemez is this sort of spectacular, talented person. He's this crazy singer who, before he goes on stage to sing like Onegin or Omar, he like listens to like heavy death Swedish goth metal. Like that's what puts him in the right mind space to sing the soaring melodies that Tchaikovsky or Schumann writes, it's just a great detail about him. And so we've become good friends, from the festival last year. And I found these Instagram videos of him playing and singing Dichterliebe by Schumann. It's a 19th century song cycle at the same time. Now, I've accompanied Dichterliebe at the piano, and it's like enormously difficult. It's multiple layers of counterpoint. It's very, very contrapuntally complex. There's a lot of piano technique. The fact that he can sing and play, I mean, there's a reason why Elton John didn't exist in the 19th century. Like, the fact that he can sing and play this is mesmeric and trance-like in and of itself. It's just such a kind of statement of virtuosity and of power. And he can sing and play it, but when you have someone just singing and playing at the piano, there's a static. It's a bit static. There's some stasis there, and we want to move from that stasis. So we commissioned Miła Matrejek to create this, who's this great video artist and moving image artist from who's on the West Coast based at CalArts, to create moving imagery behind Jemez and actually create a whole narrative out of it with shadow puppetry and moving imagery that interacts with Jemez on the piano and creates this kind of story, this narrative of a poet's love, of the Dichterliebe. So that's cool as well, because it's only 40 minutes. It's an amuse-bouche. It's something that you can see at a festival. You can go in, you can see Dichterliebe, then you can go to a fantastic restaurant, with which there are resplendent examples here in Charleston. Go to Fig or whatever you like to go to, and then after that you could go see Vanessa. You can go see a full 3-hour opera. I mean, that's a long evening, but it's still not as long as a Wagner opera.
In The Crucible?
The Crucible. I'm excited about The Crucible. So one of the themes that you see in this festival this year is reinvention, telling our stories in different ways. We have a retelling of the Iliad featuring Dennis O'Hare. It's a one-man version of the Iliad. He's an actor that you may know from, True Blood and a bunch of, I actually know him from like the 2001 Tony Award winning show, Take Me Out. So I'm a little bit of a weirdo, but he's been on TV and on film a bunch of times. He was in Harvey Milk too, and he was in American Horror Story. And then you see a reinterpretation of The Rite of Spring through Dada Masalo's re-choreography of it, her redux of it. You see a reinterpretation of Dichterliebe through Schumann. And this, The Crucible, is a reinterpretation of one of the most harrowing chapters in American history, that is, again, through a female-led artist, Helen Pickett, as the choreographer, who is absolutely spectacular, just a force of nature in and of herself, and does so with a new score by, I kid you not, Peter Salem. That is his name. And the whole thing is creepy, kind of sultry, very sensual. If you know anything about Helen's work, she knows how to create this incredible shadow play, create depth on stage. She knows how to use the stage in a way to create so much perception. And there is a kind of seductiveness in the way she choreographs. And it's to a degree, of course, since what the subject matter is about, she approaches that level of what may be sort of interpreted as unhinged sort of fear, but does so through the perspective of female-led work and female-led choreography. So I mean, it's epic. The other thing that we're recreating, of course, is Vanessa, the 1958 opera by Samuel Barber, and Giancarlo Menotti, the founder of Spoleto, that was featured in Spoleto in 1978. Sorry, 45 years ago.
So are there tickets still available when people come back? No.
Tickets are going.
Tickets
actually.
are going, yeah.
You
Okay.
probably, yeah. I mean, we've had on sale for, I would say, 2 weeks now, and we're about 50% of target. So you should probably start looking at getting tickets. Yeah.
So my concluding questions, I'm going to turn a little bit more. We've got a lot of arts management educators in the room and some students, some that work at Spoleto. Hi, Lucy. So you mentioned a little bit this idea of Spoleto being part of an ecosystem and creating public value, and I'd like to hear what you think. What resources or knowledge do arts organizations need in order to be part of that ecosystem? Okay.
I don't want to get too esoteric. It's going to be hard. I think there is a sense of some texts, a kind of discourse, an intellectual discourse that is entirely untapped, that I think helps us understand the power structures and power dynamics of all of these organizations. And those are texts by people like Antonio Gramsci, by Michel Foucault, by Frantz Fanon, by Edward Said, that really are cultural texts. They are about hegemony, what cultural power is, how you actually navigate through asymmetrical power structures. And we are, most of the time, on disproportionately the receiving end of the asymmetrical power structure. So we need to be savvy. We absolutely need to be savvy and understand those power structures to leverage the kind of work that we are doing for greater public good. And I mean, like, I'm not going to say that, too loud, even though this is on YouTube. But I think that there is some sense of importance there, that should really be a sense of one's mental framework and intellectual framework to understand how we can bring all of those disciplines to create a cultural ecosystem that is about creating public value truly in a civic sense for the people of a specific location, for the people of a specific region. And the reason why I'm talking about some of those texts is because they understand that culture is often a result of power structure and is often used by specific power structure. I mean, look at the moment we're in right now. Everything is a culture war. I mean, you're looking at Tennessee and they want to ban drag shows. Okay? You're looking at Florida, you're looking at Georgia, you're looking at all of these states, you're looking at the heightened sense of awareness where people are trying to control intellectual material. They're trying to re-script what we teach each other. They're trying to take away AP African American studies. How do we fight back? We fight back through arming ourselves with better knowledge, with better frameworks, with a better intellectual base. We can't be lazy. We absolutely have to be stronger. We absolutely have to look at this cultural material as a way to heal a people, bring a people together, and transcend the petty politicization that can happen in our sphere. So I don't know how else to put it, but like to me, it's urgent right now.
And I think we all in this room really appreciate the interdisciplinary nature that you're talking about. I mean, we're often teaching arts management, arts administration, but there's several cultural sociologists in the room, folks in the public sector, and that it's a foundation that I think is really important to the study of arts management and healthy arts organizations. Anybody in my class would know that, of course. Okay, my final question. It's a long one. Okay. What is the best part of your job? What is the worst part of your job? And how do we prepare students to navigate the difficult or challenging parts of being an arts leader?
Okay. I'm a little bit of like an adrenaline junkie. I mean, I really love opening night, and I love all the crazy stuff that could go off on opening night. I mean, if you saw Omar last year, I mean, we had people get COVID backstage. We had Jamez like tear up ligaments in his knee. I mean, everything was happening. But my God, the energy before opening night, just that sense of expectation. It's addictive. It's so exciting. And a festival is a great place because it's just that 17 days in a row, multiplied by 150. So for me, the festival itself and the moment right before the curtain rises, that's the best part. Without a doubt. You do the long nights in the theater, the production periods, the hours and hours and hours of those production periods, the months, the days, the weeks of production meetings, of commission meetings, of co-production meetings, of putting together all of the different contracts, of getting the funders, of bringing a coalition of the willing together to actually bring a piece together. And then at the very end, the most exciting thing is just that curtain rising and actually seeing it happen. I mean, that's just, it's enthralling, it's addictive, it's vertiginous, it's hallucinatory.
So that's the fun part.
That's the fun part.
Okay.
I mean, like,
yeah.
Is it a cop-out to say there aren't many bad parts? I mean, I mean, like, it's a dream job. I really eat, drink, breathe, and live this stuff. Like, it's a real dream job for me. I don't know really. I think the bad part is probably like after the festival, I have to like last year after the festival, I had to fly to Germany on like a 3-day junket to do like a speech thing. And I had like a fever of 105 and had like a horrible sinus infection. And I think like getting sick after the festival, which always happens, is like the worst part of the job. Okay. Especially when you have toddlers, like you're just getting sick all the time.
So as you know, the top of an organization, you're in demand. You're spread thin. I'm trying to have a teachable moment for our students. And how you remain. I mean, it's a dream job for you. Would you get burned out or not?
No, well, okay. I think the best way to put it is that Spoleto is an organization that is really in the midst of transformational change. And that transformational change has been a long time coming. You know, my predecessor has been at Spoleto for 35 years. I've come on board and really through organic turnover have managed to put in a new senior leadership team. And that transformational change, it's doing a lot on limited resources. And you're kind of pushing while you build up that resource capacity. And that's difficult. It's more complicated than walking and chewing gum. So because of that, there is a burnout factor. And I mean, just the seasonality of the whole thing. You know, it's not just the seasonality of the actual 17 days. It's the production period before it. It's the intensity of board meetings because we have a national board and we have people who sit on our board that are in San Francisco and in Chicago, so on and so forth, that we have to have like intense executive committee sessions and fundraisers the week up to the board meeting. Everything has a kind of intensive seasonality around it. And that is a real challenge. That's really hard to manage.
All right, well, thanks so much. I'm going to open up for any questions we have for Mena. Yeah, our cultural sociologist, Dr. Skaggs, yes?
Pardon me. Sorry. Now I won't yell. So it's not a sociology question, but near the beginning you talked about ambition as a quality of your board. So can you talk about what that means and what it means to be a leader with a board or collaborators who are also leaders and also have opinions and directions that you have to, I guess, be a good steward of?
Phenomenal question. And I mean, I think ambition, thanks to Shakespeare, ambition's a bit of a dirty word. But I think ambition, if funneled correctly, can be something that you can really congeal around and coalesce around. I mean, I sort of think of Spoleto as an entity, and by that I mean board, external stakeholders, staff members, senior managers, so on and so forth, performers, artists, everything, as a balloon that has blown really almost to its limit. And if you don't measure that correctly, it can pop, and all of that energy can just be diffused. So you kind of have to let the air out in very focused manners. One of the greatest tools to accomplish that as an arts leader, an organizational leader, a cultural leader, is the strategic plan. You have to push your organization to do a strategic plan. And you have to be an outspoken steward. You have to be the prevailing tenor of that strategic plan. Strategic plans are very complex. They're very difficult. They can be very messy. People can be left out. That's natural. That's going to happen. You're going to have people get upset during the strategic planning process. There's no way you can avoid it. But the whole idea that you can articulate 3 to 5 strategic priorities by having hundreds of people touch this plan is an absolute brilliant tool if used correctly. It takes a lot of work, but that is how you focus ambition. And that's how you do it in a moment of transformational change.
This might be a little bit of a thought experiment, but just kind of leave it open for your interpretation. Do you think that Spoleto could happen anywhere else?
Oh, it's wonderful. These are great questions. Goodness. Do I think Spoleto can happen anywhere else? Okay. So, you have arts festivals in other places. You certainly have citywide celebrations of art in other places. You have certain festivals that are interdisciplinary and also produce. Now it's getting more narrow in other places. So let's take like Edinburgh, for example. The Edinburgh Festival is the Edinburgh International Festival and the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. They are 2 separate entities. The Fringe Festival is effectively, it was founded after the International Festival and has kind of overwhelmed the International Festival. The International Festival is purely a presenting organization. It does not produce work. They are trying to address that. It has limitations, and it has a serious branding crisis that has been brewing for a decade plus on its hands. Manchester City Festival is a producing, multidisciplinary festival, and it is one of the few in the world. They are taking all of their energy and they are trying to apply it to a phenomenally huge capital project called The Factory, which I think is something like 165,000 square feet and has the capacity for about 7,000 attendees when you look at all the rooms and do all the math. What they are trying to do is find a kind of rubric of financial sustainability through the usage of real estate. The Adelaide Festival, which is a great port city festival, by the way, is also an interdisciplinary festival at a smaller scale than Edinburgh, probably more comparable to Spoleto, and also a smaller scale of Manchester. It also does not typically produce. It has produced in the past. It has produced, generally speaking, in the way Spoleto has produced in the past, which is to say, when it has produced, it has self-produced and not produced with other partners. So Spoleto in the United States, for sure, is a unicorn, because it produces, It produces with other partners, with other entities like Omar, and we're going to see more of that in the future. It's a great way to spread the risk of specific projects. It's also a great way to maintain national and international visibility if you get the premiere rights and then have those works go to those different places. And it's interdisciplinary. But its formula more recently, in the last 5 to 7 years, has been about 70% presentation, 30% production. And we want to kind of push back a little bit on that and get to about a 50-50, maybe 60-40 formula. So can it happen in other places? Of course it can. Would it really be what Spoleto does? Probably not. It would probably be an iteration that is one of those other entities, and all of those other entities are unique to their own social, cultural ecosystems that they have contributed to and thrive in.
Destiny.
I have 2 questions for you. My first question is, several times you mentioned that Spoleto is 17 days. Is there any significance behind the 17, or has it just always been that way? And then my next question is, can you kind of explain the process of programming, because you're focusing on local and international art, but then you're also presenting art and producing. So can you kind of like describe that process?
Okay, great questions. About the 17 days, I'm going to be honest with you, I have no idea. I think they're like, let's do it around Memorial Day weekend and go as long as we can before it gets like interminably hot. So I think that I really think that was the framework. And you know, they're right. Like, you know, extending it by a week would be a challenge. I have thought about that. I mean, Juneteenth is only a week away. You know, for an organization that is invested in being a cultural entity in the South, there should be something happening there. That's a strategic planning question. But like, there are some challenges there. But that 17-day thing, I think it was founded that way, and it sort of just stayed that way. And thinking about like expanding outside of the festival period, you know, there have been a lot of experiments with other festivals have done this. Sometimes it works if it's done in a strategic and judicious manner. Most of the time it doesn't. And I think the most difficult thing that you come up against when people want to expand is you sometimes see people trying to leverage kind of personal ambition in that expansion. And I think, you know, what we are in our roles is, you know, we're stewards of an organization. And I think I'm very, very attached to that. That's also part of the programming question. I was never going to come in here and just radically change the programming. That's not my style. I want to transform an organization so that it can create greater public value and be accretionary to an ecosystem and social landscape. To do that, you have to do it strategically, judiciously, with stakeholders involved. And you have to know which lever to pull at the right time. To just all of a sudden say, okay, you know what, we're not gonna have any disciplines, and we're just gonna put all this stuff together, and no one's gonna know what theater is and what music is and what opera is, which was a suggestion that once came to me, which is a wonderfully intoxicating idea, is not tenable. You have a ticket buying public. They have been enculturated to interact with this thing a certain way, a thing that has been around for nearly 50 years. So when you think about programming, when I think about programming, I want to do the things that I think are important to be done, but do it in a way within the schema, the existing schema of the organization, and slowly get to that point of transformation 3-4 years down the line. That's why that strategic plan is so important. And that's why I am interested in Spoleto as an entity and not Spoleto necessarily as a festival. The festival is one aspect. It is the main aspect. It is what we do. But we've got 30 full-time staff. We grow to 500 staff during the festival period. There's money involved in this. There is significant visibility involved in this. There's reviews and coverage from NPR, from the London Times, from the New York Times, from BBC, blah, blah, blah. All this stuff involved in this. What do you do with that stuff that makes it meaningful for the people who feel like they are not accepted in that theater? And that's the question we're trying to answer. That's the $1 million question. How do we open that theater up in a way that is invitational, is communal, is exciting? Well, there's a number of ways of doing that. You have to lower the barrier to access. You can't just have $150 tickets. You have to have artists that are reflective of the demographic you wish to serve, not necessarily the demographic you are immediately serving. And you have to go out into the community and engender that positive thinking, that positive intent, that actual creativity, so that they can actually see something happening, and then they feel like, yeah, I could go into the Dock Street. I can go into the Gilliard. I can go into the Satilli and actually feel some transformation when I see Henry Threadgill or Abdullah Ibrahim or Dada Masalo. So to me, that's really, really important. Those are the three things that you need in order to make an institution more equitable.
Okay, last question, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, what are some of the specific steps you are taking to do that? I mean, it's very nice, but, do you work with schools? Do you work with church organizations? Do you work, who are you working with? And then, the other thing is what kind of relationship do you have with Piccola Spoleto, which is sort of, it runs at the same time, and it has, I think in some ways it has some more interesting events because they really are local. I mean, in the sense they are Southeast. And so it's an interesting sort of relationship that I'm not sure exists, and I wondered what it would be or is.
So let me talk about Piccolo first. Piccolo was founded, I think in 1978, a year after Spoleto was founded in 1977. And it was founded as a solution mostly by Mayor Joe Riley with the tacit blessing of Giancarlo Menotti to be effectively a local arts festival that takes place during Spoleto that is complementary to Spoleto. So if Spoleto's the international, Piccolo is the local. So they are two separate entities. There is no common leadership. There is no common management. Piccolo is run out of the Office of Cultural Affairs by the city. Spoleto is a 501c3 nonprofit. Scott and I work together. We discuss thematic ideas together. He shows me programming ideas, how it could potentially intersect with our programming. But beyond that, there is no formal, there is really no formal linkage. So Piccolo is an unusual quirk of, I think, the internationality that Giancarlo was dedicated to, which at the time seemed to be an either-or, a binary. And I don't think that's true anymore. I'll just leave it at that. The second question, or the first question actually, what are we actually doing? So yeah, we're working with national partners to look at pre-K and actually early childhood education in low country schools. We are looking at a vehicle of creative engagement, which we have actually started. It's started by someone named Renata Rolfing, which engages with community centers and Charlestonians throughout the greater Charleston region to have artist-led work. The Tell Your Story project, which started last year, engaged with different members from John's Island and captured oral histories and turned them into creative projects that were composed around by our festival orchestra members. We're going to turn them into an online compendium, an online archive. And this year we're partnering with We Are Family, an LGBTQ+ inclusive organization, to carry the Tell Your Story project forward for 2023. There are even grander ideas in the works that we are going to work on before we publicize. But, you know, there are certain things that I think we need to do, and there are certain responsibilities that we have to the community, and we're going to see to it that they are met.
Great, thank you so much for being here. We're going to show, yeah, thank you. Thank you. So we will, folks who are in sale can stick around, but we are concluding our Arts Management Exchange talk, and thanks so much for being here. And we'll do a little sale, what's happening for tomorrow for those of us who are involved with that conference. So thanks for being here.
Thank you.